They say a man's life can change in a moment. That's bullshit. It's not a moment. It's a slow, grinding crawl made up of choices you don't realize are choices until it's too late to take them back. Mine started with blood in the sky and ended with a signature on a government contract. It was the middle of winter when I rolled into what was left of Larkridge population, scorched earth and broken bones. Snow blanketed the streets, but it was the wrong color, stained rust red, patchy, like the town had been hemorrhaging from every building. Power lines drooped low, caked in ice, and every window I passed stared back hollow-eyed, a place that quiet doesn't stay empty by accident. I knew what I was looking for before I stepped out of the truck. Harpies, not the seductive kind they paint on old sailor tattoos. These were something worse. Wings like wet canvas, claws like meat hooks, and eyes that gleamed with a hate so human it made you wonder if they used to be. I'd seen what they'd done to Mason County. Never thought I'd see it again. Turns out the federal government had been watching too. They didn't intervene, not directly. They don't like to get their hands dirty. Instead, they sent a man in a dark suit to the motel I'd taken over. He didn't give a name, just watched from the corner of the room while I patched up my shoulder and peeled blood-soaked gauze off a kid I found hiding in the church basement. Said his sister flew away with the monsters. He didn't cry. "You handled this efficiently," the suit said. His voice had the tone of a surgeon talking about an amputation that didn't take. Minimal civilian casualties, maximum collateral, and no media leaks. I told him if he wanted media control, he could start by looking into the ravine full of shredded birds I left behind the high school gym. He smiled at that, not warmly. They offered me the contract that night, black ink, no clauses about retirement, no pension, and certainly no explanation. Just a line at the bottom for my name, and a stipend that made me wonder how many others had signed before me. I didn't sign it then. First, I went out and burned what was left of the harpy nest. Their eggs writhed in the cold, each one twitching like something inside was already dreaming. I left a flare, watched it all melt into ash and scream as it went. Then I came back, found the suit still waiting. I didn't ask questions, didn't need to. The truth is, I was tired of chasing these things town to town like a goddamn stray dog. Tired of stitching myself together with fishing line and praying nobody else bled for what I couldn't catch in time. So I signed, not because I trusted them, but because the monsters were getting organized, evolving, and I couldn't fight a war alone anymore. My name is Lucas Moore, and I'm a monster hunter, and now I work for the government. God help me. 3 days later. The government doesn't do haunted houses or seances. They do fluorescent lights, stale coffee, and briefing rooms buried so deep underground the air feels borrowed. This one smelled like concrete and chlorine, as if the walls had been scrubbed clean of something you weren't allowed to ask about. I sat at the long metal table, still sore from Larkridge, nursing a stitched rib and a growing sense of unease. Across from me, A woman in a navy blue uniform placed a folder in front of me. No handshake, no smile, just a badge that said Department of Paranormal Containment and eyes that said she hadn't slept in a week. "Mr. Moore," she began, "thank you for agreeing to be briefed. This operation is classified under Tier 6 clearance. Do not speak of it to anyone, ever." I gave her a nod that said, "Get on with it." She opened the folder, revealing a grainy photo of a submarine, massive, black, and scarred by time. Next to it, a manifest that read like a horror enthusiast's Christmas list. 1 Wendigo, sedated, formerly active in the Yukon. 2 Chupacabras, Texas strain, highly aggressive. 1 Jersey devil, winged, horned, partially blind. 1 Mongolian death worm, contained in cryopod. 2 Skinwalkers, nonverbal, sedated. 1 Mokele-Mbembe, juvenile, aquatic enclosure. I looked up. "You're telling me you had all these things on a submarine?" She didn't blink. "Transport Submersible 9, en route to Site Delta. Deep sea facility, fully equipped for biocontainment and long-term cryptid study. Scientists from 12 nations signed off on the transfer. This was the safest way to move them." I raised an eyebrow. "And?" She flipped to the next page. Static-heavy sonar images. A vessel, distorted and ghostly, drifting into nothing. 48 hours ago, we lost contact. The last transmission was a distress signal, fragmented audio, screams, metal tearing, then silence. I exhaled slowly. How deep? 1,700 feet. Of course. "You'll be brought out by boat," she continued, already standing. "Once on site, you'll descend via personal dive capsule. We need a man inside, eyes on recon. We're not sending a team, not yet." I stood too, already feeling the hum of adrenaline. "Let me guess," I said. "You want to know if they're still alive?" Her expression didn't change. "No, Mr. Moore. We want to know what got out." The ocean was calm, too calm, like it knew what waited below. I stood on the edge of the research vessel Redwater, suited up in reinforced dive armor, oxygen pack hissing slow and steady in my ears. The capsule behind me was open, blinking green. A voice crackled in my earpiece. "Lucas, this is Dr. Fallon. I'll be in your ear the whole way down," she said, clipped and clinical. "You'll descend to 1,700 feet. Entry point is the dorsal airlock. It's automated. Should still respond to your access chip." "Should," I muttered. "Redwater will remain on station. We've got sonar sweep every 2 minutes. If anything moves, we'll know." I didn't ask what good knowing would do. I just stepped into the capsule, sealed the hatch, and let the descent take me. The ocean swallowed the light fast. 100 feet down, the world went green. At 1,000, it turned black. At 1,700, there was nothing. Just the dull glow of my external lights sweeping over a hull that looked like it had been chewed. Transport Submersible 9 was massive, like a floating fortress carved from obsidian. But now, it was scarred, ruptured in places where pressure shouldn't have allowed anything in or out. Capsule locking onto airlock now. Fallon's voice came through again. Once you enter, there should be a manual release lever too. Her voice cracked. Say again? I asked, flipping the capsule's external lights to full beam. I said, do not engage containment in static silence. I tapped the side of my helmet. Nothing, no ping, no fallback signal. Well, shit. I pulled the lever. Inside, the submarine was a charnel house. The airlock hissed, lights flickered, and I stepped into hell. Blood coated the floor in smears and streaks. Bits of meat, some human, some not, clung to the ceiling. Bones snapped under my boots. Something had been dragged down the corridor. Something big. The emergency lights bathed it all in sick red pulses. My HUD flickered. Symbols for containment breach, oxygen leak, biohazard. I moved fast. First stop was the lower enclosure chamber, empty. The cryopod meant for the Mongolian deathworm had been shattered open, its liquid coolant pooled and steaming. Claw marks raked the walls like it had tried to climb them, or something else had. The Skinwalker chamber, torn apart, restraints shredded. One of the containment staff was still there. At least, the top half of him was. The look on his face said he died terrified. Then came the Chupacabras. Cages empty, doors bent outward, but the Mokele-Mbembe was still there. The young creature, long-necked and strange, floated calmly in a sealed aquatic chamber, eyes huge and blinking. It watched me with a kind of sad, alien curiosity, like it was the only thing here that still had a soul. I activated the fail-safe field around its tank. At least one thing would stay in its box. Something skittered behind me, fast, wet. I turned, rifle raised, breath held. Nothing. My comms were still dead. Just the sound of dripping blood and low, unnatural breathing somewhere beyond the dark. I had two objectives now: contain what I could, and make sure whatever else was loose didn't reach the surface. One more look at the Mokele-Mbembe, then I moved into the dark. Time to work. The first thing I heard was breathing, not mine, not human. Something guttural, wet and slow, like a snore bubbling through blood. It echoed down the corridor outside engineering, just past the bulkhead where most of the internal cameras had gone dark. That meant something didn't want to be seen. I moved slow, rifle tight against my shoulder, boots careful on blood-slick metal. My HUD flickered again. Temperature drop, interior sensors offline. The map in my visor was down to a static outline. Manual tracking only. I passed a torn pressure suit. The helmet was still intact, but what was left inside wasn't. No signs of a struggle, just peeled open like something had wanted to see what made us tick. I'd seen that kind of kill before. Wendigo. They hunt by hunger, not rage. Efficient, clean in a way, but messy when they're cornered. I set a trap. 4 motion-triggered spikes down the hallway, infrared trip line just in front of the reactor door. A little bait, a distress beacon set low and steady, faint enough to sound real. Then I waited. It came 20 minutes later. I didn't see it. I heard it first, long nails on steel, dragging like a key across a locker door. A low growl, wet feet. Then, click. The hallway erupted in sound, screeching, metal snapping. My visor flared as 2 of the spikes deployed and embedded deep. 1 missed. The creature bolted left. Wrong move. I was already there. 2 rounds, silver core, break loaded. 1 hit the knee. The other caught the throat. It didn't scream. Not at first. Just blinked at me, confused, like some part of it still remembered snow and bones and being something else. I watched it die. Didn't feel much. 1 down. The next 2 hours were cleanup. I found one of the Chupacabras nesting in the ventilation shafts, chewed through a junior technician like it was ripping insulation. Took 2 shots and a blade to the spine. The Jersey Devil? Dead. Looks like something else got to it first, probably the Skinwalkers. Its wings were nailed to the ceiling with metal rods, body shredded open like a message. Whatever did that didn't kill to eat. It killed to dominate. There was no sign of the Skinwalkers themselves, just whispers on the edges of sound, motion sensors tripped for half seconds, shadows that didn't belong. I locked down that section. They weren't part of the job anymore. They were part of the ship. I got what I could into stasis, re-engaged the blast doors, used a manual override to redirect oxygen and power back to the Mokele-Mbembe's chamber. That kid was still watching me through the glass. Didn't panic, just watched. He was the only calm thing left on board. The silence was the worst part, the kind that makes you start thinking about how small you are. I stared at the wall across from me. Someone had written something in blood. It was smeared, but legible. No gods here, only teeth. Sounded about right. I tapped my comms again. Nothing, still alone. Still working. It started with a hum. I'd just finished sealing the last containment gate when the lights flickered and something deep in the ship groaned. Metal shifting under pressure, or maybe under something moving. My oxygen was running low. My shoulder was numb, and my sidearm had 1 magazine left. So when the alarm finally blared, hull breach detected Sector 4, I didn't flinch. I moved. The breach came from the stern, near the cryo storage, the same place they were keeping the death worm, or whatever was left of it. I figured the thing was long gone, but then I saw the body, or what was left of it. Its shell had been burst from the inside, like something else had used it to gestate. And it was still in here with me. The corridor was slick with something viscous and black. I couldn't tell if it was blood or bile. My boots slipped once, caught the edge of a grated floor panel, and I nearly went down. That's when I heard it. A gurgling breath, slow and massive, Just ahead, behind a half-closed bulkhead, the sound of something wet dragging itself forward. Not fast, confident. I froze, and then static. My earpiece buzzed. "Lucas, can you hear us?" It was Fallon. Faint, fractured, but real. "Alive," I said, pressing a finger to the mic. "Subs compromised, multiple containment failures, Mokel's secure, others, not so much." Pause, then, "Copy. We're tracking your signal. Capsules being lowered now. Extraction in 15. Not enough time." Another breath behind me. Louder now. Closer. "You'll have to make it," she said. "We need you out of there." I looked toward the forward shaft. If I made a run for the maintenance elevator, I could hit the launch bay. But whatever was coming wasn't going to let me go easy, so I didn't give it the chance. I dropped the last of my thermite charges behind me, primed and blinking red, slid through the narrowing gap in the bulkhead as the thing lunged, just a glimpse of it. Tendrils, bone, too many teeth. I never saw its eyes. I hit the switch. The corridor lit up like hell opened a window. The explosion shook the sub's frame, ripped the bulkhead apart, and threw me into the wall, hard enough to crack a rib. My ears rang, my vision tunneled, but I kept moving. Up the ladder, through the airlock, every breath a blade in my chest. The capsule was there, docked, waiting, lights green. I fell into it and closed the hatch. I surfaced just after dawn. The sea was calm again, still pretending it hadn't swallowed monsters. I sat in the open capsule hatch, bleeding into the morning, while the crew pulled me aboard. Fallon was there, face pale, hands steady. She didn't say anything, didn't have to. I just stared out across the water, toward the sun. "Any survivors?" she asked after a while. I shook my head. "Just the Mokele." She nodded once and jotted it down in her notepad, like that made it real. Then softer, "We shouldn't have sent you in alone." I stared out at the water, still and silent, pretending not to remember the screams. "No," I said, "but you did." She didn't argue, just watched me, pen still in hand, like she was waiting for something. Finally, she asked, "Would you do it again?" I didn't answer, but we both knew I already had. The ocean doesn't keep things. It lets them go. And what comes back is never quite the same.